Let's go back to the morning of June 30th, 1908. Over a remote forest in Siberia, the sky just explodes. It was the single largest impact event in all of recorded human history, an explosion with the force of a massive thermonuclear bomb. And for more than 100 years, it was one of science's greatest cosmic mysteries. So today, we're going to unpack the incredible story of the Tunguska Event.
I mean, listen to this. This is from an eyewitness who was 65 kilometers away. He said the sky split in two. People were literally knocked off their feet. Windows shattered hundreds of kilometers from the blast, and they felt this wave of heat so intense they thought their clothes were catching on fire. Just terrifying. And this is what was left behind. Now get this. This photo was taken almost 20 years after the explosion. The devastation was so total, so absolute, that the forest was scarred for decades. It's like a silent, ghostly testament to the incredible power that was unleashed that day. Okay, so to even begin to unravel this mystery, you first have to get your head around the sheer, mind-boggling scale of the blast itself. In a single instant, an area of forest measuring over 2,000 square kilometers was just flattened. Now, to put that into perspective for you, that is an area bigger than most major cities, like London or Los Angeles, just completely wiped off the map in a flash. The power of the explosion is just staggering. The estimates put it somewhere between 3 and 50 megatons. We're talking about a force that's right up there with the most powerful hydrogen bombs humanity has ever created. And just to really hammer home the kind of energy we're dealing with here, the blast was about 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. It's a level of force that's almost impossible to comprehend, and it all happened in the sky above a totally remote wilderness. And you know, this wasn't just some local event. The effects of this thing literally rippled across the entire planet. Shockwaves were picked up on instruments all the way over in the United Kingdom. Seismic stations felt it like it was an earthquake. And for days afterwards, the night skies over Europe and Asia were glowing so brightly that people reported being able to read a newspaper outside at midnight. Incredible. So when scientists were finally able to get out there and investigate, the evidence they found, or maybe more importantly what they didn't find, created a scientific puzzle that would last for a century.
You have to remember, this place was incredibly remote, and early 20th century Russia was in complete chaos. So it took almost 20 years before the first real scientific expedition, led by a mineralogist named Leonid Kulik, finally made it to ground zero. Now, Kulik and his team, they were fully expecting to find a gigantic impact crater. But instead, they found this, a really bizarre, swampy area where the trees right at the center were scorched and stripped of all their branches, but they were still standing straight up like a forest of telephone poles. But no crater, none at all. And that became the central question, right? This is what turned the Tunguska event from a known catastrophe into this profound, baffling mystery. All that destruction, but no point of impact. How is that even possible? So instead of a crater, they found this really strange butterfly-shaped pattern of fallen trees that stretched out for dozens of kilometers. And by looking at the direction the trees had all fallen, they realized they were all pointing away from a central point. This was a massive clue. It suggested the force came from above the ground, not from the ground. With no giant meteorite fragment to study, the investigation had to go microscopic. Scientists basically became forensic investigators, sifting through the soil and the peat bogs, looking for the ghost of whatever it was that had exploded up in the sky.
And you know what? They found it. Later expeditions in the 50s and 60s started finding these tiny, microscopic melted spheres of rock and metal. And when they analyzed them, they found high levels of nickel and iridium, elements that are pretty rare on Earth's surface but are super common in extraterrestrial objects. These were the cosmic fingerprints of the culprit.
All this evidence was pointing to one single conclusion: an airburst. The object never actually hit the ground. Instead, it disintegrated in a massive, fiery explosion miles up in the atmosphere. The shockwave from that explosion is what flattened the forest below, and it perfectly explains how you can have all that destruction with no crater. Mystery solved. Well, sort of. Okay, so we knew how it happened, but the next big question was, what was it? And the investigation basically turned into this cosmic whodunit, with two main suspects on the table: a fragile comet or a solid, rocky asteroid.
And for decades, there was a really compelling case for both suspects. A comet, right? It's basically a big, dirty snowball. It would vaporize completely, and the ice and dust could explain those glowing skies people saw. But a dense, rocky asteroid better explains the chemical evidence, like those high nickel levels they found on the ground. For years, the scientific debate just raged on. Now, the models estimated the object was somewhere between 50 and 80 meters across. This diagram here gives you a sense of its scale. I mean, that's massive, easily big enough to destroy an entire city. But, and this is crucial, it's in a size range that could potentially just completely disintegrate from the incredible stress of hitting our atmosphere at high speed.
So, how was the case finally cracked? Well, the verdict didn't just come from new computer models. It came from another, much more recent visitor from the cosmos. So today, the scientific consensus paints a really clear picture. A stony asteroid comes screaming into the atmosphere. The pressure and heat build and build until the object's structure just fails catastrophically, and it detonates with unimaginable violence miles above the Siberian taiga. And the final key to unlocking this whole puzzle actually arrived in 2013 over Chelyabinsk, Russia. It was a much, much smaller airburst, but this time we saw it happen. We had dash cams, satellites, modern instruments. The data we gathered from Chelyabinsk let scientists perfect their models, and it confirmed, pretty much without a doubt, that a stony asteroid disintegrating mid-air was the cause of the Tunguska event. And this comparison just gives you that final, stunning perspective. The Chelyabinsk event, which injured over 1,000 people, was literally just a firecracker compared to Tunguska. The sheer power of that 1908 blast is still just almost beyond compare. And this all leads to a really crucial realization. The Tunguska event wasn't some freak one-in-a-billion-year occurrence. It's a natural, recurring part of our planet's life in the cosmos. In fact, impacts of this size are statistically expected to happen on a timescale of centuries, not millions of years. And that leaves us with a final and a pretty sobering thought. The mystery of what happened in Siberia in 1908 is, for the most part, solved. But it raises a much more urgent question for all of us today. Knowing that Tunguska wasn't a one-off event, what are we actually doing to prepare for the next one?